Autistic spectrum disorders. What is autistic spectrum disorder? Autistic spectrum disorders are a lifelong developmental impairment that affects the way a person communicates and relates to people around them. Children and young people with autistic spectrum disorders are affected in a huge variety of ways and to very different degrees. This is why it's called the autistic spectrum. Autistic spectrum disorders can affect children and young people with any level of intellectual ability, from those who are profoundly learning disabled to those with average or high intelligence. At one end of the spectrum, children may have learning difficulties and require high levels of support. At the other end of the spectrum, some people with Asperger's syndrome or high-functioning autism are very intelligent academically. They can excel in their chosen field of study or work, and however, they still experience significant social and communication difficulties. Some children have other conditions that are not directly related to their autism, such as developmental coordination disorder, sometimes known as dyspraxia. They may have dyslexia or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. It's important to seek an assessment of any other conditions, as they will affect the sort of support that best meets the child's needs. So what are the signs and characteristics of autistic spectrum disorder then? Children and young people with autistic spectrum disorders have significant difficulties relating to other people in a meaningful way. They can find it hard to develop relationships and to understand other people's feelings and the social rules of communication. Everyone with an autistic spectrum disorder has difficulties in three main areas. These are known as the triad of impairments. And these are social interaction, social communication, and rigidity of thinking and difficulties with social imagination. Social interaction. Where there is difficulty understanding social rules, behaviour and relationships. For example, they appear indifferent to other people or don't understand how to take turns. Most babies seem ready to become sociable and develop communication skills from birth. Young children just seem to know that other people are important to turn to for comfort, to share moments of pleasure with, to look to for guidance and to learn from. Children with autistic spectrum disorders find this very difficult. They may seem less interested in people and find it hard to see things from another person's point of view. They often seem trapped in a world of their own, and some may like being sociable and tactile, but are not always sure how to go about this. A young child with an autistic spectrum disorder can't make sense of people and may find them frighteningly unpredictable. They may seem to relate better to objects than people, only tolerate approaches from very familiar people, not want to be comforted when they are distressed, seem to use people as a means to an end. For example, they might take someone's hand, but only to get an object that is out of their reach. Or they may seem to be unaware of social rules. Social communication. When there is difficulty with verbal and non-verbal communication, for example, they don't fully understand the meaning of common gestures, facial expressions, or tone of voice. Children and young people with autistic spectrum disorder can have difficulty with verbal and non-verbal communication. They can often find it hard to understand communication that is not literal. Expressions like "I laughed so much I nearly died," or "if you eat any more you'll burst," can be very frightening for them. They may also have difficulty understanding that stories are not real. Non-verbal messages include things like facial expressions and gestures. If a child struggles to read these messages, they may not understand what is expected of them, or recognize when someone is happy or upset and what that means. A child or young person with an autistic spectrum disorder may develop speech in a way that is slow, disrupted or disordered, or may not develop speech at all. They may often use words out of context and without trying to communicate, or not respond when spoken to. They could use language correctly but not really understand what they're saying. They can echo words other people say straight away or later, this is called echolalia, or use words and then lose them, not use them again. Not use eye contact as a natural part of communication, rarely understand or use gesture, or point at things but only to indicate need rather than to share an experience. Rigidity of thinking and difficulties with social imagination. When there is difficulty in the development of interpersonal play and imagination, for example, they have a limited range of imaginative activities, possibly copied and pursued rigidly and repetitively. Social imagination helps us understand the world, see other people's perspectives and predict their behaviour. Children with an autistic spectrum disorder are unable to do this to any great extent. This makes the world appear a very uncertain place, so children will often find reassurance in routines that they can control. Difficulties with social imagination do not mean that children with an autistic spectrum disorder are unimaginative. However, the development of pretend or imaginative play may be different. Some children never seem interested in what a toy is for or what it represents. They may focus on the features of a toy, such as the wheels of a car or the packaging it came in. Other children may run a toy car in and out of a garage, but won't act out more complex stories, or they may insist upon acting out the same story in the same way every time. Sometimes the story turns out to be an imitation of a video or a book. Other patterns in behaviour might be apparent. A child may not easily make sense of sequences and events. They may become distressed if a familiar routine changes or may resist change. They may impose their routine on others. They may engage in stereotypical body movements. For example, some children flap their hands and some rock back and forth. They may find it hard to work out what other people are going to do or why, and will only develop symbolic pretend play slowly, if at all. Here are some common challenges children with autistic spectrum disorder may face. Sensory difficulties. They may find it difficult to play with sensory items or enjoy them depending on the child. They may be sensory avoidant. Difficulties with motor skills. Children may have difficulties with fine or gross motor skills. Fine motor skills include things such as holding a pencil, while gross motor skills include standing and walking. Obsessional or special interests. Thomas the Tank Engine and dinosaurs are common obsessions, as are various types of electrical equipment. An individual focus on detail. A child may focus on minor details and ignore the main situation. For example, looking at a spot of dirt on the floor, which they are in the middle of a chasing game. Using visual supports. Children with autistic spectrum disorders often have strong visual skills, so visual supports can be a very effective way of making the world an easier place to understand. They can also help to reduce anxiety and challenging behaviour. Some examples of visual supports include real objects, photos, line drawings, symbols, written words. Visual timetables or schedules are a good way to illustrate clearly what is happening next. You can stick several pictures onto a Velcro strip. The child can then remove the relevant picture once an activity is finished so they know it is over and it's time to move on to the next thing. Visual supports can also help to explain sequences. For example, the stages involved in getting dressed in the morning. Here's an example of a visual timetable. Interacting and communicating. Communication is a particular challenge for children with an autistic spectrum disorder. Difficulty in this area leads to frustration and sometimes very challenging behaviour. Helping children to communicate can lead to a reduced anxiety and improved behaviour. Here are some tips for communicating and interacting with your child. Use the child's name so they know you're addressing them. Keep background noise to a minimum when communicating with them. Keep language simple. Speak slowly and clearly with pauses between words. Accompany what you say with simple gestures and allow extra time for the child to process what you've said. Encourage requests from the child. For example, have a favourite toy within vision, but out of reach, so your child has to communicate in some way that they would like it. Speech and language therapy. Speech and language therapy sessions assess, diagnose, and then develop programs to help. People who have difficulty communicating, they may work on things like listening and attention skills, play, social skills, and understanding. They may also use methods such as signing or picture symbols rather than focusing on speech alone. For some, the Picture Exchange Communication System, otherwise known as PECS, will be a precursor to a learning spoken language. The PECS approach is based on the idea that greater understanding between adult and child can be achieved when spoken words are supported by the use of a symbol or icon. Symbols can also be used as prompts when skills like brushing your teeth are being taught in a step-by-step way. Picture symbols are often used in combination with other interventions. It is important that any communication system is relevant to the child. You may wish to check that there are symbols and icons included in the packs that are reflective of your child's ordinary life and inclusive of your home culture, so that your child can relate to the symbols and utilize them successfully. Signing. Signing can be used alongside communication systems such as PECS and other interventions. Makatong and Sign-Along are two examples of signing. Signing is not usually intended as a replacement for speech, but helps the child to develop spoken language and communicate their intentions. Signing may be especially suitable for children who have difficulty discriminating between visual symbols or for those who do not have the fine motor skills or motivation to use picture cards. Here's an example. Everyday life. Day-to-day life with a child with an autistic spectrum disorder varies. The child may like to follow specific routines and rituals in order to feel safe, and these can be time-consuming and have an impact on the rest of the setting. For example, the child may have a lengthy morning ritual with lots of rituals they feel they need to do. Insist that people sit in the same places at meal times, and it will not always be possible to stick to set routines or ways of doing things. However, you can create an autism-friendly nursery environment where things feel predictable and manageable for the child. Making sense of the world. People with an autistic spectrum disorder often describe the world as very confusing, unpredictable, or frightening place. Children may not learn from experience or apply what they learn in one situation to another in the same way as their peers. Children with an autistic spectrum disorder are generally happier when they understand what is happening next and have some routine and structure. Home life doesn't need to be completely rigid, but having some structure to your day can really help. The structure becomes easier to understand and adapt if presented visually to a child. Developing the senses. Many people with an autistic spectrum disorder have sensory differences. Some senses are overstimulated, which is hypersensitive, and others are understimulated, which is hyposensitive. A child may, for example, have a heightened sensitivity to sound, but lack sensory awareness of temperature or pain. Some children shift between hypersensitivity and hyposensitivity. As well as the 5 main senses, touch, taste, smell, hearing and vision, there are 2 others. Vestibular, this sense is based on the inner ear, It tells us where our body is in space and its speed, direction, and movement. It helps us to keep our balance and posture. And proprioception. This sense is situated in our muscles and joints and is our body's awareness system. It tells us where our bodies are and how different parts are moving. Sensory difficulties and impairments can have a significant impact on behaviour and communication. Here are examples of hypersensitive and hyposensitive behaviours and responses. Playing. All children learn through play, but children with an autistic spectrum disorder play differently to other children. Generally, they do not engage in imaginative play. A child with an autistic spectrum disorder may line up cars, but they are unlikely to play a game involving cars in an imaginary situation, such as driving over the sofa, picking up some petrol and then having a crash. Sometimes basic imaginative skills and play can be observed, but this is generally copied and repetitive. Children also lack the ability to imagine an object as something else for the purpose of play, so they won't, for example, pick up a banana and pretend that it's a telephone. There are plenty of play opportunities that you can offer the child, though. The more play experiences children are exposed to, the more opportunities they have to learn. Children may particularly benefit from messy play, as it helps to stimulate underactive senses and possibly manage oversensitivity in a safe way. There is no pressure to produce an end product, such as a picture. Here are some messy play ideas. Water. Your child may enjoy pouring water from one container to another, or watching it spin in a water tower. Sand. Provide buckets and spades for digging, or hide items in the sand for the child to discover. Cornflower or gloop. Play-Doh. Try adding another sensory dimension, such as peppermint essence or herbs for their smell, glitter for extra sparkle, or uncooked rice for texture. The child may enjoy stretching, pinching, rolling and squashing the dough. This helps to strengthen hands ready for fine motor skills, such as doing up buttons and using cutlery. Ice cubes. Have a tray of ice cubes for your child to touch and feel. It may be the first time they experience a cold sensation. Shaving foam. The child may enjoy the feel of foam between their hands. Show them how clapping with foam on your hands makes little bubbles fly into the air. Toy ideas. Children with an autistic spectrum disorder usually enjoy games that are visually interesting and involve visual spatial skills such as jigsaws and constructions. They may enjoy bubbles, rolling a ball, torches, dark dens with lights in, Duplo and Lego, marble runs, or trains, especially Thomas the Tank Engine, and physical activities such as swinging, bouncing, climbing and slides. Sleep. Children may have problems getting to sleep or may wake periodically throughout the night. Some children will still need a nap during the day. Eating and drinking. Children may only eat certain foods or foods of one consistency or colour. Others have rituals such as insisting that different food never touch each other on the plate. This is not necessarily a problem as long as the child is eating a varied diet. Personal care and toileting. Toilet training is often delayed in children with an autistic spectrum disorder, and it is important to wait until they are physically ready. Trying to potty train a child who is not ready can cause a lot of anxiety. Most children with an autistic spectrum disorder attend a mainstream nursery or preschool setting when they're young. However, some require more specialised provision. There may be a local opportunities playgroup, specialist childminders, or a specialist school with a preschool unit. Another option is portage, a home visiting educational service. IEP or EHCP. It is important to have an individual education plan within a children's learning journal to look at their progress and observe changes in development and see what needs to be focused on. Seek support from the local authority, parents, colleagues and specialist advisors and schools. Thank you for listening. Here are my contact details. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you.